Kerry, you've always been a master at clutching hope out of the mouths of despair. So I think you gave us a perspective on how, at a time of challenges, certainly on the global stage, you see a path forward for climate action. We'll just spend a minute on what comes out of the current moment in Berlin, because this is topical, but I really want to move forward to some of the points you talked about in terms of innovation and how the U.S. can win, as you put it. What would you like to see coming out of this current?
How we all win?
Yes, sure, of course. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But what comes next? What would you like to see as momentum coming out of this challenging COP? I think that's fair to say. In the next couple of years, what needs to happen to get to the next point?
What needs to happen, which is going to be extremely difficult in terms of really getting to the next point, is that Berlin finds a way, which I'm not convinced they will, to resolve the deficit of the NDCs. The nationally determined contributions, I mean, China's at 7 to 10% between now and 23. That just doesn't cut it. Now, China is you know, it doesn't implement global policy in ways that we do or others do. It's different, obviously. And so I spent 8 years negotiating with China in the last years, 8 years, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and then as the global envoy and the Secretary of State. In fact, I went over there and met with President Xi within about 6 weeks of being secretary in order to change the equation, specifically. And President Obama bought into this notion, obviously, or it wouldn't have gone. And that was that you can't really make anything happen if China isn't on board. So we got President Xi to agree, at first very tentative, very difficult, because they didn't trust us and they were uncertain of where they wanted to go. And they hadn't really fought out the climate issue on a public stage at all. And they're very shy about putting down a marker where they don't know exactly where it's going to go and what they're going to be able to accomplish. So we spent a year working on our NDCs, and indeed, 1 year after we started, President Xi and President Obama stood up in the Great Hall of the People and together announced what we were going to do in Paris. That's how Paris happened, folks, to be blunt with you. Nobody could run for cover after China and the G77 had to act. So,
but if I may, I mean, that was a crowning moment for your climate diplomacy, is the foundation stone of the Paris Agreement and how it was reached, that bringing together these two great superpowers, the two largest polluters on climate pollution, with China obviously surpassing the US in recent decades. But that world, I would put to you, no longer exists, at least in the short to medium term. We're in a different kind of world. It's hard to envision that kind of a meeting on climate topics these days. Can you give us one pointer, given your years of experience, decades, on how to navigate that competition, really, which is where we are with China on the global stage, where the U.S. is playing a different role? We've taken our toys and left the game, right? So left the pitch. How does this move forward? And to bring us back to that set of arguments that sounded like a bit of a flywheel of optimism you were presenting to us. How do we get from here to there?
No, I still have some optimism. And Xi Jinping and I, he's my counterpart in China, we've known each other for 25, 30 years now, and we are genuine friends. And we talk about everything when we're together, not just the job and so forth. And he's prepared. He's going to be operating with Tsinghua University as his sort of banner. And I'm doing some work through Carnegie, but also through Yale University. And we are going to try to, have an influence on what both countries are thinking about climate. The key to the climate was, and I was there when President Biden spoke to President Xi about it and said, look, this is a universal issue. This is not a bilateral issue. And we need to deal with this because if China and the United States do, things happen. And that's exactly what happened. In Glasgow, we came up with a memo that laid out a pathway to raise the NDC ambitions. And China said, well, we can't change the target, but we can do things that will make a difference. That's what China does. That's what I think they're doing now. They haven't changed their 2060 target. They haven't changed their peaking target. But I'll tell you this, I bet anything on it, they've peaked. They're going to go down because China is now, after 6-8 years of building up to this, China is the biggest manufacturer and deployer of renewables in the entire world, indeed more than all of the rest of the world put together. Think about that. Unbelievable what they're doing. And so I think, without announcing a change in their target, by virtue of the amount of renewables they're deploying and less coal they're depending on, even though they built some additional coal, which is horrible to see, but that additional coal I don't think is going to get lit up. I think it's their hedge against an economy imploding because they have blackouts. They live in fear of it. So my personal judgment is that China is going to be ahead of us, even in reductions of emissions, because ours are going up because of the rate at which they're deploying.
Let's pick up on that point. You made a case for how and why China may be peaking on emissions, and of course, the point about the clean technologies. The most recent cover in The Economist a week ago took this up with a 10-page special report, really digging into this from my colleagues who are based in China. And our argument is that, in fact, though there are security issues and economic issues raised and supply chain issues raised by China's extraordinary expansion, solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles, and so on, this is a gift to the planet. This is something that it doesn't matter to the atmosphere where the cuts are made. And developing countries, Pakistan, extraordinary expansion in solar, the Sun Belt countries, all on the back of inexpensive Chinese technology. Now, this actually, while great for reducing the trajectory of atmospheric emissions, poses that challenge back to the US. And this is where I want to take the conversation with the time you and I have on stage. What is the opportunity for the US to respond through innovation, something you talked about a little bit on stage? I want to flag up for our audience here, those here and virtually, there is a new report issued today by the Council that I recommend to you very highly, the Global Energy Innovation Index. You'll see a précis of it outside. The full report is online, of course, and for those online, you'll find a link as well. And it ranks the top countries on their innovation competitiveness, led by a team by David Hart, who's an expert in this area. And among the other things, I'll just tease one result. The top 10 does not include the US or China. And so, and this is a multifactorial analysis including both the invention, but also policies, deployment, very thoughtful way of doing it. So Secretary Kerry, without having had the benefit of reading the report, and I know you haven't, the idea that America has some room to go, as indeed does China, on innovation, on climate tech innovation, energy innovation, what levers would you press if you could to help America in this challenge? As you say, everyone will win when clean energies flourish, I presume is your thesis, but what you said before, what does America need to do particularly to do better?
Well, I mean, America, do I separate America from the administration?
America's been around 250 years, so let's start for that. If you can.
Well, there's certain things that just aren't going to happen. I can sit here and say, here's what we ought to be doing. It's not going to happen for a period of time. The private sector is going to continue to move, and the private sector is going to do it because they see alpha, money. You're going to be able to make money. And because the marketplace globally is moving exactly in the way you described. Because Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and many other countries, Laos, Cambodia, and places, desperately need electricity. They desperately need deployment. There's a huge market out there, folks. I mean, the energy market is the largest market the world has ever known, ever. And it's bigger than the Industrial Revolution because we have to redo everything. We have to do grids. We don't even have a grid in the United States, by the way. We got an East Coast thing and a West Coast thing, and then Texas has its own thing. You got it, yeah. Absolutely. And we can't send an electron from New York to California. That's insane in this day and age. And so how do we get our how do we get our act together to do those things? Yeah. Politics. That's unfortunately what it comes down to. You have to win elections. If you don't win elections and you don't have people in power who want to do something, it isn't going to happen. And there are far too many choke points. We were hopeful we were going to get permitting reform before I left the job.
Joe Manchin is still sore about that, but go on.
Well, we should have done it. It's insane not to have done it. And that's another thing. We can't send an electron across state lines because of politics. people get in the way, or not, they want their market share. They don't want any disruption in it. They don't want to compete for it, certainly. I can tell you in 28 years in the United States Senate, you'd be amazed at how many CEOs came into me and asked me to join in legislating their monopoly, even though they were, quote, conservatives and didn't believe in, seriously, it does come down to winning, having an idea that wins. The idea that should win right now is all across this country, we are in a race with respect to AI. China, let me just, I made a note of this just before I came in here. China's target by 2025, end of this year, is 300 EFLOPS. That's the measurement of supercomputing power output, et cetera. And ability to gauge 1 quintillion floating points of operations, which is how it all works, how the models work. And they've got something like 300 models at this point in time of major language capacity. So China has a strategy to be able to win in the fight. We actually don't, despite what has been said. We're undoing IRA, we're undoing the incentives. It won't happen all at once. It'll go till 2028 or so, and so there'll be an election and a different president. So things can change here. But for the moment, we need to fuel the playing field so that companies can actually follow through on the plans that they have. Look at the
just to take on the point about AI, I mean, clearly there's enthusiasm in Washington for AI. It's one of the main areas that we've seen deregulatory push from the government in power now, and we've seen some efforts to unleash nuclear power, for example, as one of the potential energy sources, fast-tracking permitting. So there is a desire to clear the track for AI. Presumably, you would argue that you need all of the above, not just certain kinds of energy, but as well clean energy.
Look, I am absolutely not a doomsday or even close to a doomsday person. And that's part of where the whole debate went awry. Because people were arguing morality over materiality. And I know the council has sort of been wrestling with some of the terminology of what we do. We need materiality, not morality. We're not going to win on that argument. Mm-hmm. We just, because that's not where Americans live day to day, particularly now with affordability of the problem. So you've got to come at them with price. It's cheaper, folks. It is cheaper to have electricity from renewables. And now batteries, with the sodium-ion batteries, the batteries are getting better and better. So there are, like UAE, which is an oil and gas producing country, has just finished 4 nuclear reactors that are now online. They have a huge solar field, one of the biggest in the world, they're playing out. And they're investing in renewables and alternatives and so forth because they know that's ultimately the future.
And the world's largest battery.
And the world's largest battery, 19 gigawatts of battery reserve, in order to be able to prove they can provide what's called firm energy on demand. The minute that happens, folks, with those 3 entities, with wind, solar, battery storage, it's Katie bar the road, we win. But there's also, on pricing, the price of those deployments of wind or solar are going to be really measurable. And there are no hidden costs. On the other hand, if I just finish one thing, coal, which is still too preeminent, coal, nobody considers the cost of black lung disease. Nobody considers the sludge that kills rivers, lakes, streams. Nobody considers the impact on COPD, on heart disease, all these other things. If you were to really tally up what coal does to our planet, it's multiple times more expensive than doing.
Sure, when you do the full accounting, and it's not just. And I opened.
But we ought to be able to sell that.
Well, even in China, I was the Shanghai bureau chief for The Economist for a number of years, and even in China, which is abundant in coal, they started to move away from coal because of the human health cost and the political cost. People demanded to know what is the PM 2.5, that is the pollution levels. It became a salient political issue for the Communist Party,
And the biggest,
which is how they began
the
push.
biggest exhibitor of the effect of the air was the American Embassy in Beijing.
Absolutely.
Every day,
They used
Chinese
to
would
tweet
tune
out
in because the American
and
Embassy
they used
would
to
put
really
out
piss off the
PMs.
Chinese, by the way, by doing that. So more power to them for having done it. Where I want to go with this, the last point, and that is, the great Wayne Gretzky once said that, when asked his secret to his success, he said, "I skate to where the puck is going to be." And with that in mind, rather than try to chase China on the cheapest solar, although nothing wrong with adopting and diffusing innovation, that's a big part of victory and innovation, where should the U.S. be skating to on this question of energy, climate, innovation? What's next, in your view?
Well, next is here, and that's AI. And AI is going to change everything, everything about everything. I mean, white-collar jobs in America will diminish before a lot of other kinds of jobs. You don't need code writers as much anymore. Code's going to get written by the other AI models. And equally importantly, AI, we're invested in a company that's going to have the ability to be able to create virtual power plants where you actually manage through software the distribution of the energy. Do that, folks, and you don't have to build the next combined cycle gas-fired power plant. Moreover, it takes 5 years right now. It's 4 to 5 years waiting period to get a combined cycle gas turbine. So if you want to build your AI center and get it up and competitive in the next year or two, which people want to do to win against China.
But you've got all those NVIDIA chips sitting around. You can't have them through 3 years are worthless, right? So you need the power sooner.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's what
speed to power, as they call it.
Speed to power.
And renewables win on speed to power. Okay, I'm out of time for me to ask questions. That's good news for all of you.